Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, and welcome to this formal meeting of Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Paul Skinner, the chairman of the committee. My vice chairman, unfortunately, is poorly, so he sends his apologies, but he is here virtually. The audio-visual feed of this formal meeting is going to be streamed live via the County Council's website. I'd like to begin by health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. I do hope that doesn't occur. It's quite breezy out there this morning. Before we move on further with main business of this meeting, can I just remind everybody to silence their mobiles, laptops and iPads, and we'll now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1. Tom, can you just give me the apologies, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Reid, Councillor Seymour and Councillor Dyer. Thank you.
Item 2. Do we have any members that wish to declare any interests other than the ones that have declared already? Thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny meeting held on the 29th. We have a couple of points that have been pointed out. Thank you very much for that. One is Councillor Tom Dyer's title, and that is?
That is support, executive support for environment, economic development, environment and planning. And that will be filled.
Thank you. So that item's picked up. And there is another little omission that we had a verbal report from Anglian Water, and that needs to be included in there. Apart from that, I'll propose that we take it through. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Hayes. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. Don't think we've got.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Davey.
I am with you virtually this morning. There were no substantial new announcements to make, but I would just draw members' attention to the fact that in the budget process on Friday, we have allocated a further £1.5 million over the next 2 years to continue the work we've been doing in the last couple of years in relation to flood and drainage works across the county, dealing with some of these difficult issues that members are all fully aware of. And of course, we've announced a further round of property flood resilience funding as well. So that's where we are, Chairman. We've got there's a lot going on, and obviously we're waiting to see what reports have come in over the weekend in terms of water damage and other environment matters. But I would say we can start the new year with a degree of positivity that we have funding to do some of the amazing things that we have been doing in the past and can continue doing in the next couple of years. So thank you for that, Chairman. Happy to pick up any points from members.
Thank you very much for that, Colin. And we are really thankful for the support that we're getting. The partnership obviously works, and we've got quite a good number of officers that work across the partnership and able to deliver. And I think one of the things that we have been doing is we really do need to be celebrating the work that we do as a partnership, and we're really grateful for the executive support. Thank you. Moving on to item... Sorry, Colin. Okay. Moving on to item 5.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, we have not taken a vote on the minutes.
I thought we had.
We've done a seconding.
Ah, Okay.
But we need to take a formal vote.
Oh, can we take sorry, I got ahead of myself. Can we take a formal vote on acceptance of the minutes? I proposed it, and we had a seconder, just a formal vote, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself this morning. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for that.
It's all right. It's Councillor Baxter that pointed out.
Yeah.
Councillor Reid wants to come in.
Councillor Reid, would you like to come in?
Sorry, no, I was only trying to vote, Chairman. Thanks.
You're virtual, you can't vote, so...
Okay, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you for the support. Do we have any senior officer announcements? You can pick them up in the reports. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 5, which is Development Fund, Drainage Investigation and Flood Repairs, Progress on Programme Delivery. Matthew Harrison, or Matt Harrison, please can you present? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. Yes, so if I may, I'll take this report as read and just provide some updates on some of the key points for it. This neatly follows on from what Councillor Davey has just announced with regards updates on the Development Fund for Drainage Investigations and Flood Repairs. And this first update is on the initial 2.2 million that was awarded to deliver a programme of work. That programme of work to be completed by March 2022, so we're nearing the end of that first programme. And that's been quite successful now in delivering several smaller drainage and flood repair issues across the county, as is identified in the report. But also we've actually managed to identify one or two larger schemes and take those forward within this programme to address some long-standing issues. One of those schemes in particular at Curtin has brought some attention recently just because of the scale of that project. That's an area that has suffered from surface water flooding in the past. There's been internal flooding to both commercial and residential properties, as well as significant flooding to the highway, which has caused disruption on main routes through the village. And what this funding has allowed us to do is to carry out a thorough investigation to determine what the problems are. Those issues were far more extensive than originally anticipated. But what this now means is that we can go in and do a more extensive scheme, address the issues, and then hopefully bring some long-term benefits to Curtin, rather than having to go in and do some short-term fixes and continue disruption to both the village and day-to-day activities, but as well as, of course, those who have suffered at the hands of the flooding. So this is a real positive, something that this fund has helped us drive forward, as well as a lot of the smaller schemes. We will be meeting with the Parish Council tomorrow evening in Curtin to talk through the project. And although we are waiting on confirmation from some dates from the contractors, we are hoping to be on site by early to mid-April, but dates just to be confirmed at the moment, but that should be confirmed very soon. So as I say, hopefully that's hopefully a positive there, and we can really address some of the issues that Curtin has suffered. But Curtin isn't the only scheme. As I say, many other areas have benefited from this programme. Scotland is another project that is developing, and hopefully now we can take forward as well to some resolution, not just the fact that we've been able to do some thorough investigations and determine what the problem is. We can hopefully now take it to the next stage and deliver solutions on the ground, which of course is what we all want to see. So the programme of work, as I was identified originally, is coming to an end and will be completed, but we have had the good news that there has been additional funding agreed for a further 2 years, roughly equating to around £750,000 per year for starting from financial year 2022. And as a consequence, we are developing a further programme of work to deliver against the development fund. Very much in line with what we've done. We'd like to see the good work continue with addressing some of these smaller but more troublesome drainage problems that we encounter. And that programme of work is being developed at the moment, so we'll be able to bring that back to a future committee to confirm that once that has been agreed. But yeah, just building on the comments from Councillor Davey, that's very good news. Very much appreciated the support that's been given to address this area, and much needed. And just a final point of clarity, that this is in addition to any partnership schemes that are being led through the flood risk team, and of course a full programme of drainage works that is led by the highways asset team. So this is additional to address some of those issues, and very much welcome. So I will leave it there if I may, but as always, more than happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll probably see you tomorrow night at Curtin. Councillor Fleetwood, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm appointed to this committee from West Lindsey, West Lindsey District Council, so some of my comments will come from that direction. It's pleasing to see this report, but it's very disappointing to see that works in Cherry Willingham have not commenced, even though the majority of the projects within this, the parameters of the report, have come forward. Cherry Willingham has not. And I'm slightly concerned because if I then put my county council hat on and I look at Bardney as an example, Bardney Lakes, as it's affectionately known, is carriageway waters on Abbey Road in Bardney, where the road goes underwater to nearly a foot, and that's been ongoing for several years. If I take you to Langworth, Scothan Lane, where the issue from 2 years ago with the flooding of Scothan Lane was such that it was washing in and out of properties through garages, mainly down to the issues with Anglian Water and potentially EA, but not County Council. County Council were at fault there because they didn't close the road. If I take you to, I can take you to so many villages, and I don't know if I'm on my own as a council, where I seem to have these issues coming together and creating havoc problems for local residents. What really concerns me is that some of this work comes out of Section 19 reporting and reports from Section 19, and I have over several years asked that Section 19 reporting be enhanced so that water going into garages, conservatories, does become Section 19 reported rather than just being peripheral flooding. So I think there's an awful lot more needs to be done in this direction, and indeed we've had a bit of a wet weekend. As far as I know, nothing's entered properties in the area I represent, but there's been one heck of a lot of water on the carriageways, and I will be leaving this meeting to go and talk to a highways officer about severe flooding, covering potholes that's taken a wheel and a tyre out over the weekend. So there's an awful lot there that does need to be done. I know the officers are trying to do their best. 1.5 million sounds a lot, but I don't know if it's significant enough to actually address some of the issues, but I am concerned about delays.
Thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. I can assure you that near misses are recorded, but I'll let Matthew cover that off. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. You do raise a couple of points there regarding schemes that have appeared on the Development Fund programme. There was initially identified to be some works at Bardney, as you quite rightly say, but those works, when looked at, were taken back into under the Highways programme. Highways were looking at those because it was largely carriageway flooding and possibly some gullies. So that was actually taken out of the Development Fund programme because it was felt that that was more appropriate to be picked up by Highways colleagues. Regarding Cherry Willingham, again, quite right, that was one of the significant schemes that emerged out of the Development Fund programme. What the Development Fund has allowed us to do is carry out a detailed investigation and really try and understand a lot of the issues that are going on in Cherry Willingham through modelling data, through various investigations, and we now much better understand what we're faced with in Cherry Willingham. part of the development fund was always for investigations and flood repairs. A lot of this was to try and determine, to understand what many of these issues were that we're facing. Obviously, flooding is notoriously difficult sometimes until you put a spade in the ground. You're not entirely sure what you're going to be faced with. So, Cherry Willingham, we have that much better understanding. We've got a scheme that is essentially shovel ready to go. Subject to a few caveats there, but one of the things that we're exploring is that because there's a school involved which has had some issues as well, which links into the wider drainage network, there's also additional funding being supported through the Department for Education, which is being explored at the moment, and we await to see what the outcome of that might be. So Cherry Willingham is very much still on the radar, but it's a work in progress at the moment, and obviously we would like to see things delivered on the ground. And some of that will actually tie into existing highway programmes as well. So it's been very worthwhile, this fund, to determine what the issues are, but obviously, of course, we would like to see something delivered on the ground, and that's ultimately what we'll be aiming for in the fullness of time.
Can I just come back and say that there wasn't
Certainly
a reply with regard to Langworth, and Langworth is supposedly a working group that's being put together that will hopefully find a resolution for Scotland Lane Langworth. The sort of figures that's been murmured are £500,000. It's supposedly coming from Highways budget, but I am concerned that a lot of what Mr Harrison's just commented about, the projects are going to come from, the funding is going to come from Highways, and we know how stretched Highways are, when in reality a lot of it is down to flooding. Shouldn't that funding be coming from this committee?
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, if I may, it's obviously a balance. This funding was never going to solve all the problems that we have, unfortunately, because it is extensive across the county, and some of it is determining the balance between those that are highway flooding, which might involve works that they would undertake anyway as part of their usual regime, whether that be gullies or cleansing or that works of that nature. But certainly the programme moving forward is open to discussion, and I'm more than willing to have that discussion with either Councillor Fleetwood or members for any issues that we're aware of, to see how we can best manage this. But it is acknowledged, as much as this funding is welcomed and it will help us address some issues, known issues that we're aware of, I'm afraid it won't address everything, unfortunately, and this programme will again be a programme that we develop in partnership and try and prioritise some key areas that we are aware of, and we will be working very closely with Highways as we develop the programme to ensure that it is a sustainable programme that we do deliver.
Thank you for that. Jonathan, would you like to come in?
Yeah, morning, Paul. Thank you. Just wanted to touch on Langworth as just as a good case study, hopefully, of partnership. We've got flow monitors that are due to be installed in Langworth very soon, and that will obviously help us better understand, the issues that are going on there, and obviously that can feed into this working group that Councillor Fleetwood just mentioned. So, I suppose just to reinforce the point you were making right at the beginning, Paul, the opportunities for partnership are out there, and we are doing what we can as organisations to work together to try and manage that risk.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Fleetwood?
We'll wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say how pleased I am with the progress that's been made with the Curtin flood alleviation, the surface water flood alleviation that Matthew Harrison referred to earlier. This area, which is affected by the flooding, is half in my area, my division, and half in Councillor Alison Austin's, and it's been a headache for me, to say the least, since I first got on the council in 2009, and they were having problems there a long time before that, and I'm very grateful to this fund for enabling us to be able to have a proper look and a proper investigation into the problems at Curtin and what was actually causing the problem. It's going to be a big job to put it right, but it's going to cause quite a lot of disruption, and probably 3 months right in the middle of Curtin there. But you know, I'm very hopeful this is going to sort it all out, sort the problems that we've been having over all those years there. So grateful for this fund. It's been a great help to Curtin, and I'm sure it will be to many other places as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm quite aware of that area as well, and it will make a big difference. All of the schemes that we've put in seem to be successful. So that's something to look forward to. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Matthew, it's a general question, and I hope the committee will bear with me. It's on home insurance. I can't find anywhere I could actually fit this in correctly, but does the insurance company contact the authority or any other partner to request information on areas that are flood areas? I'm asking due to once I give my postcode, I'm told it's a flood area and the insurance will have to go up. The only interesting thing is the last time the area was flooded, it was 75 years ago. So I'm just wondering where this information comes from the insurance company. I'm sorry for dropping it in like this, but I couldn't find anywhere else to, you know, bring it in at.
Well, I'll do my best to answer that. In that, I mean, insurance companies have access to information, obviously, to make their own assessment and judgment on policies. But I suppose one thing we do need to bear in mind and is taken into account is that where we have flood risk areas and areas as shown at risk, if a scheme or project or something comes forward to address that flood risk, there are in some cases opportunities to have that amended, obviously, so it is reflected in the fact that a scheme was then delivered betterment to an area, and then that should then be reflected going forward. There are processes to do that, and I might actually here be speaking on behalf of colleagues sat behind me at the Environment Agency, because of course we're talking about all sources of flood risk here, not just surface water. We're talking about the coastal risk, we're talking about risk from rivers as well. So there will be different processes involved, and different authorities will take the appropriate measures to do that. But if an insurance company was to contact us, we could certainly point them in the direction of the information that we have available to us, but bearing in mind much of that is actually publicly accessible anyway. So for example, the risk for surface water flooding is available through the .gov website. Of course we could back up any information up with any records that we have through near miss or the Section 19 investigations, which are publicly accessible anyway. So I don't know whether that's as thorough an answer as you was hoping for, but hopefully that's some clarity.
Morgan, you indicate.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, you can also write into the Environment Agency and request for a flood history report and or a insurance-related request letter. So we would look at our records there and provide information on flood history or the risk of flooding for that location. The other thing I would say, sometimes we often get this that we haven't flooded for sort of 75 years. A lot of our mapping is best based on perhaps a 1 in 100 year flood risk event. So it's quite likely that yes, you might not have been flooded for say 75 years, but you were still within that sort of 1 in 100 year sort of flood risk envelope. And also the other thing for insurance companies is they're perfectly at liberty to create their own data, carry out their own modelling, and quite a lot of them do that, and come up with their own flood risk assessments. So we would advise that if you're having problems with insurance, write to us, and also to shop around as well.
Thank you for that, Morgan. It would probably be nice to get a presentation from some of the insurers at some stage, and then we'd be probably find it clearer. Councillor Bunny, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think hopefully this is appropriate. As a fairly new county councillor, worked in sort of the parish for a long time, Market Raisin and on West Lindsey, I have to say it's very confusing for me, and I suspect for some of the parishes and the public, to know exactly which scheme or which body is responsible for the flooding in their area, whether it be surface flooding or not. My colleague in Fleetwood was obviously talking about Section 19. We've got partnership, we've got the environmental agency, and a lot of the time people just don't know what's going on. There doesn't seem to be much communication from my point of view going back to people who've been flooded or are concerned about flooding, and when they do try to find out where the scheme lies to try and find information, you're never quite sure who to go to, and that does seem to me to be a problem.
Thank you for that. Matthew.
Yes, thank you for that. So responsibilities are different across organisations, as you quite rightly point out. So for Lincolnshire County Council, we have the responsibility for surface water, flooding, ordinary watercourses, groundwater. The Environment Agency for rivers and sea. Angling Water will have their sewer network, and so on and so forth. I think it would probably be wise at some point. We're more than happy to give an overview presentation, maybe at a future committee, actually, as a sort of a recap just to how this does lie, which would probably be helpful. But regarding particular schemes, they would usually be led by the respective organisation that ultimately has that responsibility for the particular risk, so whether that be surface water or the coastal, and often the relevant organisation will be dealing directly with that parish or individual or whatever it is that is taking that scheme forward. One thing I am very mindful of, though, is that with a lot of these things, communication is key, and not just communication but clear communication. So I'm always open to exploring ways that we can probably do things better or differently around communication, and more than happy to have that discussion with anybody, because it is, as you say, it's an important point.
Please come back.
If I might very quickly, I mean, I appreciate that County Council is responsible for surface flooding. Now, that means something to me, and I think it might mean to a lot of people, but then whether it becomes a highways issue or whether it's a Section 19 issue or whatever becomes confusing for a lot of people. And I think of many areas in our area, our ward, and I'm sure around the county, where there's flooding or drainage problems on the road, which then creates problems with potholes. Is that going to be resolved by highways, or is it something that perhaps this group here could be looking at when the problem is to do with riparian or water courses and all that sort of thing? And I just don't think it is clear, and as a consequence causes confusion. And I think we need to look at how we can make that better.
Yeah, if I just briefly come back on that, thank you. No, I do agree, and there are several things that are happening at the moment. For example, my colleague will be presenting on the riparian project shortly, so yeah, that kind of brings that element into it, and communication around that is key. I was in a meeting with colleagues from our technical services partnership on Friday as we were looking through the processes that we have at the moment with Section 19 investigations, which I'll come on to in a report in a little while. But just to say that, again, we're looking at how can we make sure the communication around that is sufficient, and that people understand, are they dealing with highways, are they dealing with the county council, who are they dealing with, and who is likely to take anything forward, whether that be conducting the investigation or any work that may follow on from that. So that is something that we are mindful of, and we're considering how we can best communicate that going forward. So haven't necessarily got all the answers yet, but take your point, absolutely. I do feel I completely agree that communication is key in a lot of these areas as we how to take it forward. So yeah, just something we're taking into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And I think this is where it's also important that we celebrate some of the successes we have with the schemes, so people know, how they've been made up and how we've got to the end of them. Councillor Mrs. Martin, MBE, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following on from Councillor Fleetwood's comments about local schemes and local involvement, I'm just trying to understand the process to actually get local schemes onto this list that's coming forward, because I had a very long conversation last night with my local county councillor, going through a list of problems that we'd had in the Horncastle in particular last night, over the weekend, with flooding and near misses, etc., etc. and there are several long-standing, ongoing issues in the town that, for me, would be ideal to get onto this list to do some further investigation on, because Highways have been saying to us for a long while it needs further work, further investigation as to seeing what's causing the problem. Now, is there any consultation with the local ward members about schemes in that category that could go onto the list, that could benefit from further work being investigated? Does this purely come through officers? Did I ought to be telling my county councillor to get in touch with Highways officers? I'm just trying to understand what the process is to get schemes onto this list for further work.
Matthew, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. It's a combination of both, actually. It's a combination of things that officers have identified through ongoing issues, but also things that local members have raised with us as well. So all I would say is I'm more than happy to have that discussion with anybody as we continue to develop this programme, because absolutely right, they are just the sorts of things that this programme is there to try and address, albeit obviously there is limited funds, but yeah, these are exactly the sorts of things we're trying to address, and more than happy to have that conversation. So some of these things are long-standing issues that we are already aware of through either officers identifying them or issues that have already been raised with us by members. But if anybody has anything that they would like to discuss with us to see if there's an opportunity to address a particular issue which may not yet have been identified, I'm more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Any further questions, anybody? No? Therefore, I move that the committee receives the report and requests that the comments from the discussion be recorded and taken into account, and obviously added on to the work programme as well as necessary. Does anybody dissent from that? Thank you. So we're on to item 6, Lincolnshire Homeowner Property Fund Resilience Assistance Scheme update. Matthew again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So yes, this is an update for committee on the Lincolnshire Homeowner Property Flood Resilience Scheme that through the floods team we've been leading on. And once again, if I may, I'll take the report as read, but just pick up on some of the key points for members. So this came about following the flooding events that, or the severe weather that we had over 2019 and 2020, where we looked at exploring a pilot for property flood resilience in the county, and this was based on something that Essex County Council, that we were made aware of, that Essex County Council had been running. So we took that process and adapted it to our own processes and for Lincolnshire. What we developed was, as I say, unique to ourselves. This included a case management system to minimise the administrative burdens on the team, to align our processes with the National Property Flood Resilience Code of Practice, and then to look at the whole suite of measures around property flood resilience. So resistance, recoverability, preparedness, and to take that whole holistic approach as to how we would look at property flood resilience. So the approach that we have taken has received some national interest and support. It's been identified as through CIWEM, through Syria and DEFRA, and actually got raised in the House of Commons, where it was identified that the learning that we take from this project will be welcomed, because property flood resilience is very much something that is being looked at nationally. In fact, there was some budget for some project areas, not in Lincolnshire, I hasten to add, but across other parts of the UK, to look at property flood resilience. So what we're doing in Lincolnshire will feed into that, and the learning that we take from it. So we ran this trial. And that was largely identified through the Section 19 process, where we knew people had been flooded, and we sought to work with homeowners and residents to look at if there was any volunteers to work with us to trial this process for property flood resilience measures. And we did have some take up on that, around 10 properties, and that was some important learning that was taken from that process. So following on from that, we decided to roll this out more widely, and that came into effect in July of last year, in July 2021. And that's picking up on those key measures that I talked about earlier. So we're looking at the whole suite of characters here for property flood resilience. What we have been successful in is bidding for some grant and aid funding to help support this, as well as local levy, and Lincolnshire County Council is also helping fund this, as Councillor Davey alluded to earlier in his introduction. And we'll be working with properties and property owners moving forward. There is an ambition to move 35 properties per year from the very significant to the significant risk bandings as a result of installation of property flood resilience measures. But what I have to say is at the moment, it has actually been quite a relatively low take-up. The floods team are promoting this through advertising on social media, parish councils, county news, potentially looking at if we can make use of anything we have at the Lincolnshire show. But at the moment, it is a relatively low take-up. Clearly, the weather no doubt influences this. If people have been affected by severe weather as there were in 2019, there is interest. And perhaps if we're in a situation where we've been quite lucky of late that we haven't had any major events, it may not be seen as a priority. I don't know. This is some speculation that is being looked into at the moment, as we look at what we could perhaps do to encourage people as best as possible to take advantage of this if that's something they want to do. But we will do our best to continue to promote this. I think it certainly has value. As we move forward, obviously we want to help people protect their homes as best they possibly can and support them in doing so. So again, I'll leave it there if I may, but more than happy to take questions on this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's nice to know we're once again leading the way. Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more. It's genuinely welcomed, and clearly this level of protection quite often can be the most cost-effective means of dealing with flood risk if a larger scheme isn't necessarily viable because of a small number of properties. However, I would just ask, what measures around what control measures are we putting in place around the resistance stuff in order to ensure the long-term operability of the measures that we're putting in place? By definition, we are assuming that these are things that are only really ever going to be tested. I mean, we hope never, but probably 6, 10, 12 years between installation and needing to use those flood doors, the flood barriers, air bricks and air brick covers. And appreciating the amount of money that we're putting in here, it would be really useful to have some means of assurance that homeowners aren't going to lose the air brick cover, or the seals aren't going to deteriorate on those flood doors, because by the time that they're actually needed, that may very well have happened, and rendering that investment and those efforts, I mean, I'm not saying null and void, but the flood may just happen slightly more slowly than it would have done otherwise. And I think it's just really important that if we're putting that money in to put those measures in place, that there are some guarantees and controls that they're going to be there whenever they're needed, however long that may be.
Thank you. Matthew?
Yes, thank you for that question, Councillor Ashton, and that is actually something that, as part of the learning and the pilot that we've been doing, is to try and really understand the longevity of this, to make sure that it is fit for purpose when needed, as you rightly say. And some of that will be taken from some learning in other areas. As you say, sometimes seals can deteriorate around doors or whatever it might be, and things like that. So that is something that we really want to understand and ensure that there's either a level of support there or an understanding on the property owner as to what may be needed in future years. Because you're quite right, it could be well, hopefully never, but it could be a number of years before this is actually tested. What I would just say regarding the assessments of the properties. One of the things that we have done slightly different to other areas is that we have made it bespoke to individual properties. So there is actually an assessment on a property by property basis to look at what the best features would be for that respective property based on location, design, etc., etc. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and that is part of the assessment that we're doing. But absolutely valid point. I don't think yet we have the answers, but we are looking at learning from other areas, and it is something that we're taking into account as part of the learning for this project. But that has been identified, and a valid point. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Fleetwood, please.
Yes, it's a positive step forward that 35 properties have been identified that could be upgraded to allow for less flooding in their vicinities. However, it's disappointing that only 10 have come forward in the last year, and although we're talking in terms of 35 properties per year, potentially in the next few years, if we look at Section 19 reporting, even at 35 properties per year, I think that it may not be sufficient to cover for a lot of those properties. I've been involved in flooding issues now for best part of a quarter of a century, maybe a bit longer. I used to have a property that did have a little bit of ground that flooded against it. And what concerns me is that, okay, we're talking in terms of only 10 properties coming forwards, but having said that, I sit on 2 drainage boards, I'm part of the Environment Agency, I'm chairman of 2 planning committees, the county and West Lindsey. The message hasn't got through to me, so I don't know how that message is getting through to the public. If we talk in terms of social media, I look long and hard at social media in a variety of places, and I don't see that message getting through. So how can we actually send that message out, and how can we actually have a waiting list for properties rather than the shortfall for people coming forward and actually taking up these needs?
Thank you, Matthew.
Yes, thank you for that. No, I completely agree. It would be nice to be in the position where we have a waiting list, and yeah, we can really get this rolled out to help residents. As I say, the comms around this is something that is being worked on to try and make sure we can get that message out there. I suppose a question to committee today is I would welcome everybody's support here, that if you can get it out into your own areas through this committee, and we just bang that drum as best we possibly can to get the message out there. All support in promoting this scheme would be welcomed.
Thank you. Morgan.
Yeah, when we've previously carried out similar work through the Environment Agency, we often find that homeowners are sometimes resistant to these measures because it's a very sort of visible acknowledgement that the house is perhaps at risk of flooding. But what we would say to that is that it's a bit like fitting a burglar alarm. The more that you can do to enhance security of your property, the more that you can help to offset insurance costs. So we actually have on our website a property flood protection flood risk report, which homeowners can fill in and provide to their insurers if they've had resilience measures fitted to their house, and that might be a way of reducing some of the insurance costs for their houses. So there are other ways perhaps of making this a little bit more appeasing to homeowners.
Makes it more important to get the insurers here and get their perspective on it, really, to be quite honest. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I echo what Councillor Fleetwood says, except that I've got different numbers from him. He mentions that we're aiming at 35 per year. Whoops. And he mentioned 10, but at the top of page 22, it's only 7 that have been admitted onto the scheme. I think the 10 is the 10 shared with Essex.
Beg your pardon. The 10 was for the pilot. And then following the wider rollout of the scheme, we've had 7 come forward with an ambition for the 35, if that clarifies. I think it was 7, I believe, wasn't it? Sorry. That's what. Yes, the 10 was for the pilot, and then we rolled this out further in July 2021. And the 7 with an ambition of 35.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, it is disappointing, and it is kind of, I feel like King Canute in that we've got enough funding for 35 per year in a county of how many houses and how many at risk of major flooding. The second point I wanted to ask was about JDU. Is JDU something that we have as a county council anyway, or is it something that's been brought in particularly?
That was brought in particularly to try and assist with... Okay, sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, it is something that we had available to us, but it's something we've adapted to for this particular project to alleviate with the administrative burdens on it.
Okay, so my question was, is it costing us a fortune? Sounds like it isn't, because it's something that we have to hand. So given that we've only got 17 and hoping for 35, how would you roll it out at scale? At the point that people wake up to the impending catastrophe of climate change and its effects on Lincolnshire, when are we going to be able to say to all of the East Coast, get ready, be resistant, be ready for recovery and be prepared for flooding? Because if we can't find 35 houses that are interested, there must be 35,000 that ought to be interested. My next question was about the planning system. So a lot of this is affects the planning system, and when we build, not particularly a question for you maybe, but when we build new houses and when we give permission for new houses and alteration for houses and businesses, how resilient are the houses we're building? Are we embedding sustainable urban drainage systems into new housing and new planning applications? Is it something that planning authorities have the opportunity to say, no, you shouldn't build that because it doesn't have reasonable measures for flood prevention and flood mitigation? And then for existing homes as well, where people have had front gardens for years and they need parking, and so they ask somebody to come in and turn the garden into a car park, is anybody, district or county council or environment agency or anyone, is anybody able to insist that people who are either tarmacking over or bricking over their front gardens and similar measures, able to say that's got to be done in a sustainable drainage way, so that we're not just pushing the water on, we're not making the problem worse by basically trying to build a car park or a playground or whatever. And finally, if I may, Chairman, it's been said about certainly one of the solar farms which is proposed, that solar farms in a countryside setting may lead to additional flooding. Is there any evidence anywhere that would ever happen? Thank you.
Well, I can reassure you, Councillor Baxter, this county actually wrote a book on sustainable drainage to give out to all the planning authorities within our area. I'll let Matthew come back in.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have to be honest, planning isn't my area of expertise, but there are one or two elements of that I can hopefully answer for you. So regarding sustainable drainage, that is a process now that is strongly encouraged and advised. And if there is an application that comes forward for 10 or more properties, Lincolnshire County Council is a consultee in that process where we give advice on flooding and any measures that might need to be put in as appropriate regarding sustainable urban drainage. Clearly, the application is then dealt with by the local planning authority, but obviously advice is provided regards flood risk for 10 or more properties. With regards the number of properties, particularly to the Homeowner Property Flood Resilience Scheme, clearly people are at different levels of risk from different sources of flooding depending on where they are in the county, and some measures may be appropriate or not, as the case may be, depending on what they're faced, of course. But as I say, the approach that we're taking is on a case-by-case basis. Individual properties will be looked at as what is the best possible solution for that property. Clearly, individuals may choose not to do that or do part of that or whatever. That is kind of their choice. But we will offer that sort of bespoke approach to individual properties so they know what the options are and what the best possible solutions are in offering some form of protection. Regarding the solar farms, I've also recently been brought to my attention about the flood risk from solar farms. I have not had a chance yet to look into if there was any evidence regarding the flood risk aspect and surface water runoff and so on and so forth that you would suspect may well be a problem. So I'd be interested to see what I can find around that. But clearly there are some solar applications in for Lincolnshire, and they are likely to be dealt with through the National Infrastructure Project, and will be picked up by our strategic planning team. So they are certainly something that is on our radar, and further discussions to be had around that, I think. So, yeah.
Please do.
Thank you for your comprehensive answers. The only one I'd come back on is about the rollout at scale. If we're doing bespoke plans for each of the properties that come along, we can't do that for the whole of the East Coast. How are we going to embed it into people's minds that they need to be prepared and resistant?
I can see David preparing himself, because as regards the East Coast, there are wider discussions going on around the East Coast and sort of the future and what that may or may not look like. So I'll perhaps pass over to David if he wouldn't mind on this occasion.
David, please.
Yep, no problem. I think when it comes to questions of scale like that, there are real differences. The reason that property level measures tend to be bespoke to individual properties is because they're generally aimed at quite rapid flooding, which doesn't last very long. So, you know, the sort of thing that will be typical during a downpour or a serious rainfall event. When you're looking at the scale of the East Coast and the potential hazard that would come from major coastal inundation, we wouldn't be looking at property level innovation. We'd be looking at more a broader strategic approach, and we're currently developing a longer term strategy in the area of the East Coast to look at how we adapt communities and how we manage our approach on a geographical scale for that, because it's so much bigger. It's in many respects. I'm sure Morgan would agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Morgan.
Please do, Morgan.
Chair, if I might, I just wanted to come in on the solar farms, just to ask the team about whether we do get consulted as part of the planning process, and we do. So we'll be looking at our usual, areas of flood risk, potential for flooding further downstream, that sort of thing. So, and we'll be putting recommendations in as part of the planning process. But as Matthew says, planning is the responsibility of the local planning authorities, and they choose to take our advice into account or not.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mrs Martin. MP.
Thank you. Well, this is something that we've got some experience of in Horncastle, because when we did the Bain River flood storage scheme in Horncastle, we couldn't get a scheme together on the Waring. So what we did get was a large grant of money to put individual property protection in for the worst flooded properties on the Waring. And as Morgan says, there was a certain reluctance amongst property owners to put it in, because they feared that it would devalue their property if they were admitting that they were going to at risk of being flooded if they wanted to sell. What we found was that it was only by going and knocking on individual doors and going through the issues with people, which Robert Caldwell and myself did at the time, was the only way actually to work through with people the issues that they had. Now, that's not easy when you're looking at a large number of properties, but it did help to get us up to the numbers in Horncastle that meant that the grant we got was taken up. But the other thing that we found was that once having done these individual property protection schemes, you do need to ensure that people, as property is handed from one household to another, people know how to use it and keep signed up to the flood protection phone lines, because there's no good having pieces of equipment for air bricks or garages or anything else if you don't know when to put them into place because there's a flood warning. So that's a real issue to get to grips with, because as property does change hands, that knowledge doesn't always go down the line as well. And it is something that I think maybe we still need to look at in Horncastle, because some of the properties have changed hands since, and I'm not convinced that everybody who now owns the property knows how to use those pieces of equipment effectively or when to use them. So just to highlight that as an issue, really.
Thank you for that. Some excellent points being made there. It might even be that they put them in a safe place and they don't know where they've got them either. So I think probably we need to do some work around there. Councillor Bully, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I welcome the scheme, and I think we do need to get it out to people. I fear that £5,000 might, for some, seem not enough, and they might be put off by it. And I'm just wondering whether there are any case studies which have been, examples which have been done, which can be used to show people what can be done with £5,000 and how that might protect their properties and the sorts of things they could look at. Because often when you're dealing with some of these people, they are worried, they're anxious, they're confused, they don't really see it clearly unless it's actually very clear in front of them.
Thank you. Matthew.
Yes, no, thank you for that. And I think some of the learning taken from working with Essex County Council will probably come into that, because they are ahead of us in the sense of how long they've been doing this type of approach. Although, as I say, our approach is slightly different to theirs in that we've made it sort of more bespoke and specific to tailor it to our needs. So, but you're absolutely right. If you can demonstrate to somebody the benefits and show that that's really worthwhile, and that's something I think we can do from what we've done working with Essex County Council and the example that they have rolled out. So, I'd just like to add, I'd really thank you everybody for all your comments today. This is really worthwhile, and to feed back into the team and those leading on the project. So I welcome everybody's comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matthew. I think that if we get some sort of comms package out to go through both county and all our district partners, that will certainly help. Councillor Davey, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I pick up on your last point. I totally agree. We do need a strategy, so I'll be asking Matthew to provide a couple of briefing notes for members of this committee and to all councillors regarding both the role of water management and who does what and who to contact, and also on the Property Resilience Fund. I think we do need to communicate widely across our authorities and our partners about the opportunity, and we should take advantage of that. So Matthew will have some work to do once the meeting's over. Just want to pick up on a couple of comments from Councillor Baxter, and the point's been answered well. We're not consulted on planning applications for less than 10 properties, and ultimately, we shouldn't be building any new properties, new houses, new businesses, without them being properly sustainable for the long term and properly flood resilient. So I think there is a piece of work, there's a message there that we ought to really take a view, whether it's one house, 10 houses or 100. We should still have the same consistent view about sustainable drainage for all those applications. In relation to solar farms, we have 5 very major applications in the county. They're all national infrastructure projects. The strategic planning team will be looking at those applications individually in terms of our responses. But let me assure members, we'll be looking at all issues, whether they're contributors to a greener future, or whether they actually create a carbon footprint in their own right, and also any implications of their development. So members should be assured that we are looking closely at the solar farms issue, and we'll be working with our partners in drafting our formal responses to the national planning infrastructure work. Finally, and just wrapping up, I'll just say that I think the last couple of items has been a very valuable discussion for me, and there's a number of issues I've picked up which I'll be talking to officers about. So thank you for all the contributions from members.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, anybody? No? In that case, thank you everybody for the input. That's been really, really good. And I move that we receive the report and request that all the comments are recorded and be taken into account. Does anybody dissent from that? No, thank you. We move on to item 7, and that is the Lincolnshire Riparian project, and that's going to be presented by Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So this is going to be an update, as you rightfully noted, on the Lincolnshire Riparian project, which came about following widespread flooding experience in 2019. And what the project's looking to do is exploring how existing ways of working can be improved to develop a more robust, coordinated and sustainable approach to dealing with flood risk from riparian assets and watercourses. The project was a last update of the project was provided in September 2021, whereby it was noted that we was undertaking a parish and town council questionnaire. We sent it out to about approximately 130 parish and town councils across Greater Lincolnshire. And following on from that, we have analysed the results, and in the light of national, regional and local experiences, we have developed a joint action plan which consists of 14 measures, which is highlighted in Appendix A of the report. At the time of presenting, the two highest priority measures are raising the awareness of rights and responsibilities of riparian landowners, alongside ensuring a consistent approach regarding enforcement activities. One thing I would like to bring to members' attention is that throughout the development of this joint action plan, considerable care has been taken to minimise any risks associated with actual delivery of the measures, particularly with regards to resources. And the other thing I would like to mention is that the priority of the measures at the time is subject to change as new developments and aspects of work are completed, but obviously kept under continual review. So what currently the next stage is the draft joint action plan. This will be presented to the strategy group of the Joint Lincolnshire Flood Risk and Water Management Partnership in April 2022 this year, and then with implementation of the measures to follow thereafter. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I mean, the previous about resilient measures, that was hard enough to get people to understand what that was about. This is another one that's very much the same, getting people to understand that if they've got a riparian, their responsibilities amongst it. So, Councillor Fleetwood, please.
You've nearly stolen what I was going to say, and that is when you get to a stage of flooding, nobody cares whose water it is. It's just water they don't want. And it doesn't matter if it's water off the carriageway, if it's water from Anglian Water, water from the Environment Agency, wherever. It's just water they don't want. And the problem is that a lot of people don't understand what a riparian ownership of a drain is. And going back to Councillor Davies' previous comments, I think this needs to be added into the big plan of explaining to people exactly what there is available and whose responsibility it is. A lot of ditches in rural areas do tend to get filled in, and some of them don't get pipework put into the bottom of them of adequate size. It's getting better nowadays in that the drainage boards and others are consulted and there is a reference made to them. But there's an awful lot of drains and pipes out there, half full of clay and mud, and clay is terrible, of limited capacity, and people don't appreciate that sometimes the drainage issues do start in somebody's back garden somewhere or something similar. So I think that message needs to be clearly explained and taken forwards.
Thank you for that very much. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and quite a few of the drainage boards are really quite proactive in that they've lined areas through habitation to make things right for the years to come. Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a particularly big problem in fenland areas. Where the drainage boards have got adopted dikes, that is fairly well under control now. But there's a huge network that don't come into that category. and the value of riparian dikes are very often not appreciated. They're regarded very often as an expensive nuisance. I'm particularly concerned about those riparian dikes alongside highways and those that are associated with developments. I think the chairman knows of several instances of where failure to where riparian dikes have been filled in and inadequately piped or not piped at all have caused huge continuing expense for the county council highways. So I think county council highways need to take this this issue very, very seriously, because it's an expensive problem for them in some parts. Now, what I would like to see is that LCC highways have much greater powers of controlling the filling in of riparian dikes alongside their carriageways. I think there should be a system where if an owner wishes to fill in a dike adjacent to a highway, then there should be, he should have to notify the highway and get permission and to make sure that the highways are fully aware and that the work that's undertaken is up to proper standards. So that's the first point. The other point is riparian dikes alongside housing developments or other developments. I think the management the management agreement that is associated with that development should clearly have the riparian issues clearly stated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. So I wholeheartedly agree with some of the comments there. And the only other one that's regarding pipe sizing, the adequacies of something that was put in 25, 30 years ago wouldn't meet the demands of the modern climate due to the change and the type of rainfall we get. So we probably ought to consider some guidance out there. But yeah, points well made. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Very clearly, I welcome the report, and I welcome every effort that can be made in raising the awareness and importance of riparian watercourses. I mean, it's very interesting just driving here this morning. You can see where riparian watercourses were because the farmer has very clearly filled it in and has now got a flood instead of a crop. But I think we probably need to appreciate the genuine limits of what we are likely to achieve by this without tackling the issues of budget and enforcement abilities, capabilities, powers. Because we can raise awareness of rights and responsibilities. We can do it in conjunction with national communication campaigns. But if the people that we are talking to are not willing, then it comes down fundamentally to what can we do to make them more willing, what can we do to compel them. And this is a problem which IDBs have. And appreciating we have IDB extended boundaries, which are a fantastic solution to this problem. I don't think it's something that ourselves as a highways authority or necessarily local flood authority would need or particularly want to take on, because we're very, very lucky in Lincolnshire that we have drainage boards that know the rules on all of this stuff. Unfortunately, what they don't have is the money to do enforcement properly. And it's one of the vagaries of the way the state in this country is set up, that we give powers to bodies to do enforcement, but we don't give them the money to do it with. Obviously, I would support any measures that enhance the ability of risk management authorities, ideally drainage boards, but other partners wherever necessary, to restore the design standards across catchments. But there needs to be a clear understanding of the rights, responsibilities, powers and cost recovery. And at the moment, I don't see that in place. I don't see it going to be in place. And I don't see it going to be in place with the best efforts that we're talking about here. I genuinely fear that we're going to be doing an awful lot of activity, but not necessarily an awful lot of direct action, which is genuinely needed. But I think we do have an opportunity in Lincolnshire to provide the leadership on this issue that is probably lacking nationally. And the reason I say that is that we have this problem. It's not a problem unique to Lincolnshire, but I believe the scale of it perhaps is. The extensive coverage to which we have here with the Drainage Board community is not replicated in many other counties, certainly not to the standard that it is here. We have a well-established partnership through the Lincolnshire Flood Risk and Water Management Partnership, which again is not replicated elsewhere. I would really, really encourage us, as I say, to take the lead, to come up with a plan that we can present to government, that we know would work using our expertise, using our experiences here, because we cannot, without presenting that, I don't think there's any point lobbying on rights, powers and funding and expecting government to come up with a plan, because we understand this issue in Lincolnshire far, far better than anyone in a government department. And I believe that if there is anyone in a position to formulate a plan and say to government, have a look at this please, it's us. And as I say, until we have the means of cost recovery on enforcement, on budget to do enforcement, and some clarity around the powers that are available, some tidying up, because at the end of the day we are relying on some pretty ancient bits of legislation, bylaws, and it's a genuine minefield. So some kind of clarity around all of that is what is needed before we can have absolute faith in restoring and protecting riparian watercourses to the extent that we need them to be.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley Morris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is probably the glaringly obvious, but when it says, I mean, there are sort of bits that I would consider sort of slightly soundbitey, awareness raising of rights and responsibilities. How do we actually do that with riparian owners? Do we have, I mean, I have sort of, I'm on a drainage board, and it's obviously something that the tiny hamlet which I live in, new owners, certainly of two of the properties, had no idea and just filled in the drains until I made the point, but had no idea that's what they were supposed to do. So what do we actually practically do rather than endless think about it? Please don't take that the wrong way, but what do we actually do that that raises awareness? I mean, do we contact these people annually and make sure? Because as Councillor Ashton said, both of us use what's the 7 Mile Straight, which is near us, and you drive up and down, it's like a dotted line. Some are filled in, some are flooded, some are really well cleaned out, and others look like a wildlife garden. So I'd be interested to know what we actually do rather than what we sort of say we do on a general basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come in?
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Chairman. We really do support the County Council's effort to raise the awareness of riparian responsibilities. It's a massive task. Just one of the boards that I represent, we have 2.5 people in effect working on this task. and we engage with every single development. We look at all of the planning applications that go into the board areas, and if they have an impact at all, if there are more than 9 houses, for certain we're looking at it, and even less than that, because even small developments of 2 or 3 houses can affect a hamlet quite significantly if the drainage isn't addressed. We do take Section 25 action against people, and I even signed off some letters last week, and we will pursue them until they actually comply with the Drainage Board's wishes within the Drainage Board area. And outside that, we work in partnership with the County Council, and we will follow up on issues that are raised with us, and we will take things up to the point where we're actually going through towards prosecution if people do not comply. That does not, however, cover all of the riparian requirements. It doesn't meet all of the highways requirements of these small, innocuous drainage ditches down the side, which actually serve a really good purpose to everyone's movement around the area. And particularly in Lincolnshire County Council, with 40% of the area below the 8-foot contour line, or roughly below sea level, at or below sea level, these things are magnified significantly. So everything we can do jointly would be great. We do, when we go in and we you introduce a scheme to protect properties because someone's maybe taken some action and filled in a dike or put in a pipe that's too small, we make certain that goes on to the deeds of the property. But we can't do that with every single property across the whole county. So it's general awareness and understanding that much of the area we live in is artificially maintained. And you've heard from David earlier about the coastal inundation threat that we face all the way back to the Wolds. But even upon the Wolds, the riparian watercourses are still serving a very real purpose.
You make some points there, and some of it is getting that awareness out to the conveyances and legal professions that they need to be making their clients aware of what they're taking on. And that was part of what we were trying to do. Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thanks, Chairman. A lot what I was going to say was actually said by Councillor Ashton. But I would like to, I think the key word here is responsibility. Whose responsibility for, the dike? The only time it comes up is when there's a problem for it. Now, I know, for example, there's a dike, it runs down the bottom side of Crosscliff Hill. Lincoln City Council produced a map that clearly showed the dike was on the county side. The county clearly showed a map that it was on the city side. Now, this situation went on for a long time, and it was best put out, Councillor Austin put it. The dike was actually filled in over years, and it just flooded. And then at the end of it, I believe they was trying to blame the water board for it. So I think we got a stalemate that was cleared up eventually. But it is, the key word is responsibility and acting before a flood. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. 2 points. First is to echo another of Councillor Ashton's points about enforcement. And I've just Googled Section 25 because I'm not as familiar with the Land Drainage Act 1991 as I should be. Do you know how many we do in a, or presumably, is it the Environment Agency that take that action, or is it the County Council that take the action? And in either case, how many in Section 25 notices do we issue, and how many get to the point of either an enforcement or a fine in a typical year?
I couldn't give you the figure of exactly how many we have in a typical year, but what we tend to do is to work with people to overcome the issue. If the issue is not forthcoming from the individual, then we'll go in and solve it ourselves and give them the bill. So we will resolve the issue somehow. Sorry.
Are we talking about dozens or hundreds or a handful?
I'd probably say about a handful. most of them don't get to the Section 25 level. Normally we would engage and go along and see the property owner, or it's the parish council's contacted us, or the county council's raised it if it's outside a drainage board area. The majority of times we do reach a resolution, but that takes quite a bit of effort. The whole idea is to get people educated and to understand the importance of what that small ditch can actually do, and the impact it's having and injury it's causing to those around them.
Yes, I agree that prevention is always better than cure, or carrot is always better than stick. I just wondered how often we need to use the stick. My second point is about the and thank Mr. Davies for the report, by the way. The action plan on page 27 currently looks quite underwhelming, in that in all cases on page 27 we say, when will it happen? We don't know. How much will it cost? We don't know. And where will the money come from? We don't know either. Are there any plans to fill those gaps in?
Ryan, please.
Yes. Firstly, yes, there is. At the time of writing, details haven't yet been confirmed by the partnership, so that's why those put as to be confirmed at this moment in time. But as I can say, there are a broad range of measures. We do have indicative timelines currently set out. We're just waiting approval by the strategy group of the partnership, and then at a subsequent meeting we could provide updates with regards to timescale, etc. Chairman, could I come back on one point that was raised earlier?
Please do.
Please, thank you. So it was with regards to how can we actually raise awareness of rights and responsibilities. Well, at the time of writing, we're in the process of developing a draft engagement plan, communications and engagement plan, which is taking quite a broad and holistic look at how we can raise awareness. So this could be from things like social media posts, newsletters, press releases, county putting articles saying county news, also working with local parishes to raise awareness of the rights and responsibilities, which then in turn they can then pass that information on just raising awareness of if you have an issue, who to get in contact with, etc. And that's currently in the process of being developed.
Thank you very much for that, Ryan. And indeed, that's why we've highlighted this and working on it as a committee, because we felt it hadn't got enough importance, and it's raising that level of awareness. So hopefully we don't have to use that stick, because people know what they have to comply with in the first place. Because if you have to get to use the stick, it's already too late. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've crossed off some of my notes now because the debate's moved on and the information's been presented and some questions have been answered, which is good. I was going to talk about enforcement and also raising awareness. Some of that has now, of course, been covered. But regarding the enforcement and prosecutions, good to hear some has taken place. But maybe for future meetings we could be updated regularly on those numbers and that data, so we can be up to speed with that, and also the process regarding reporting this. That will again be very helpful for us to have that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. You make a very good point, and we'll ask for that to be brought to us. Thank you. Councillor Crawford, please.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chairman. Ryan has brought up what I was going to say. Making householders and homeowners aware of their riparian rights, that could be brought up, like I said last time, in the county news. We have a very good magazine that goes to every household. And not only that, that could also come into play with item 5 for who to call an emergency when there's flooding. We have that opportunity. It wouldn't cost us, I don't think, that much, and they're probably pleased to have an article to fill. So I think that would be a very good first port of call to get everybody aware of those 2 items. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent point. Well made. Thank you very much. Any more questions? No? In that case, I move that the committee receives the report and requests that all the comments that we've put in be recorded and taken into account. Does anybody dissent? No? Thanks ever so much for your input on that one. Moving on then to item 8, which is the flood risk team update, including the section 19 investigations. And that's Matthew again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just before I get into the report as presented in the pack, I thought members might just be aware about any effects that the weekend's weather has had. It's been a headline news item over the weekend across the UK, obviously, and I just thought I'd provide a quick update as to what I know as of this morning with some of the effects on the county. I have to say, touch wood, so far, and I do hasten to add so far because this is clearly a developing situation, we do seem to have got away quite lightly, certainly around the flooding aspects, certainly inland around the surface water element. There has been several instances of carriageway flooding, I've been informed, and our highways colleagues were busy over the weekend, various blocked gullies and the like, but nothing too significant, thankfully, I'm hearing at the moment. Trees, on the other hand, which obviously isn't a focus of this committee, but that kept people rather busy over the weekend, and I think that's where a lot of the response went. We have had, let me just see, 5 on Friday and 1 on Saturday reports come in to us, which look like they will be classed as a near miss across the county. Details to be confirmed as yet, but as I say, touch wood, thankfully no reports of internal flooding to properties as yet, but I do caveat with that this is obviously a developing situation, and may come in the fullness of time, but it does look like we've probably got away with things quite lightly, thankfully, so maybe not as bad as it could have been, so hopefully some good news. If I could then come on to the report as presented. We would ordinarily at this point report on an update on the Section 19s as a standing item, and that would be the purpose of the report. That does feature in the report, but I also just wish to trial something with members of the committee here today that also take the opportunity to report on some of the work that is in progress or has been delivered around what the floods team has been involved in, and as well as some of the other initiatives that we report upon in the specific report. So I'd welcome views on this, but I do think it's important that we sort of bring to the attention some of the work the good work that has taken place. But first of all, dealing with the Section 19 investigations, I am very mindful it has previously been reported to committee about the backlog that we have following the widespread flooding events in 2019 and 2020. That has brought some challenges in the number that we've had to deal with and the resource that's been available. I would like to report that I've had some very productive discussions with other colleagues in the floods team, as well as colleagues at our technical services partnership who are helping us produce these reports, to just look at how we're approaching this to make sure the system is as efficient as it can be. And I'm pleased to say that I think we've found a positive way forward, that you will really see some changes in the numbers now, and we'll make some inroads into these investigations and get the reports completed, as obviously we would all like to see. So I present the numbers in the table in the report there for you. I would like to say hopefully next time I come to committee in May to report, you'll see those numbers have changed significantly, and we'll really make some inroads into that. So hopefully that's positive, but that has been a challenge for us just because of the sheer volume of reports that we've had to deal with. I also present the numbers there with what we've had in the last quarter, and thankfully the weather has been fairly kind to us, so the numbers are still quite low, although one would argue that 5 is still 5 too many, but it isn't as bad as it could have been. So thankfully the weather has been quite kind to us. There was one query I have had raised regarding a specific Section 19 at Market Raising, which I think was through Councillor Bunny. I'd just like to report that investigation has determined that it was in fact a near miss rather than internal flooding, but more than happy to catch up with you after the formal meeting, Councillor Bunny, if you wish to discuss that in more detail, but I can confirm it is actually classed as a near miss. Okay. Moving on from Section 19, so just wish to bring to your attention 1 or 2 projects that we've recently been involved with partners through the floods team to deliver some works, or about in the process of delivering some works, and you'll see those listed at the back of the report. So I shall bring my colleague from Anglian Water, Jonathan Glerum, in a moment to discuss some of these, because it's been a true partnership approach to achieve what we're trying to achieve or have achieved in certain cases. The report was written a little preemptive. Mindful it was some weeks before we were due to meet, so some of these works are ongoing. Some have recently been completed, so we're just trying to finalise a few details. But I think you'll see there with the likes of Bimbrook and we're really, and Watlow, we're really delivering some benefit for relatively little financial outlay, working in partnership here, but really delivering some significant benefit. Of up to 15 to 20 properties better protected. So there's some really valuable work here, I think, being done in partnership, and this demonstrates some of what is going on. If Jonathan is on the call, I may, if I can at this point, bring Jonathan Glerum into this item now. As I'm aware, he would probably just like to update on some of the works at Tallington and that I've highlighted in the report there. So I'll pass over to Jonathan, and as we do this in a true partnership style. So thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Matthew. It's rather strange. I can only see myself now, but never mind. So yeah, I just wanted to come in at this point, Paul, as you know, because I think it's probably more helpful for me to come in here than have a separate item on the agenda, because the things I wanted to talk about this month are actually the partnership schemes that we're doing in collaboration with Matthew and others. So yes, you've mentioned Tallington. So that's a scheme that we'll be leading on to try and come to a conclusion on what's happening with a surface water system that runs through the village there. That's been a long-standing problem. In conjunction with that, actually, just going back to a previous agenda item, we've also recently completed the install of some property flood resilience at one of the cottages on the corner there as well. So that was a replacement of some previously installed property flood resilience measures, which, as had been talked about amongst the committee, had previously failed because they hadn't been maintained properly. So yeah, just a good example of that in action, I suppose. So, but really, just coming back to these projects, yeah, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we are working in partnership. We are always keen to explore opportunities to work together with Matthew and his team to solve problems. And I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there, Matthew, in terms of the outlay. So, and the benefit that we get by working collaboratively together. For relatively small costs, we get some significant benefit, and more importantly, the community itself sees that benefit. And instead of trying to solve a problem in isolation by ourselves, by actually working together, we're generally more successful, but also it costs us less at the end of the day. So, hence why we're always, on the lookout for opportunities to work together. The other one I wanted to raise, which I think might be the issue that Councillor Clark was talking about in Lincoln, is another scheme that Matthew's aware of. It's Altham Terrace in Lincoln, where again we'll take the lead on this, where our system discharges into a riparian-owned watercourse that's completely blocked up. So, and I think between ourselves and the county, we've decided just to move forward with that and try and solve the problem that I think results in flooding almost most times that it rains heavily. So, so some really great examples of partnership working there, and I'm really pleased that the work that we do across Lincolnshire is often looked at sort of enviously by other lead local flood authorities who want also to do something similar. But we've been doing this for a number of years now and been doing it successfully. So yeah, happy to take any questions, Paul, and Matthew, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I will actually bring Councillor Clark in at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really getting confused with this now, because I raised it last time about Altham Terrace and Hall Drive. The residents even get more confused than what I am, because they received a message last week from the Anglia Water Board saying the work had been carried out. On Sunday, I stood there nearly in about a foot of water. So obviously the work hasn't been carried out. But can someone send me an email to actually clarify what the position is there, so I can pass it on? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that, Paul, if you like. I don't think the work has been completed yet, so that may have been sent out in error. It may have been a message just to say that we were going out, but I haven't seen that. But I'll get a note through to you in terms of timescales of when we propose to do that work.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I'll bring Councillor Baxter in next, because
thank you, Chairman, and thank you to everyone involved in the works at Tallington. The meetings at Tallington Parish Council are always enjoyable, but I look forward to meetings that are slightly shorter because this item is being resolved. I'm really grateful. So on behalf of the residents of Deeping's Western Rural, I just say thank you very much.
thank you very much for that, Councillor Baxter. It's all. I feel that we don't celebrate the good work of this partnership enough. All of the partners work together. All of them feed into the near misses, etc. And by getting that database better and better, we serve the public better. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you. I'll take up that individual case with you later, if I might, Matthew. But a general point, really. When a Section 19 investigation is made, presumably a report is written, is that report made available for people or not? Because clearly the resident that I was speaking to wasn't aware of any decision that had been made. I gather the same went through for the district council. And I just wonder why we as a county don't do that, whereas I do know that in North Lincolnshire, for instance, the reports are published online and can be read at any stage.
Yes, thank you for that. So the reports are available through the link that's supplied in the report. So that provides a summary of where we are. So they are publicly available. Of course, we are slightly cautious with the full reports because it includes personal details. So we do have to be careful how that information is shared more widely. However, the meeting that I was in on Friday, where we were discussing the best way forward with Section 19s, we were actually discussing this very point about information sharing. And I think quite rightly the resident should be obviously aware of the report because it has a direct bearing on them and their property. And of course, it is shared as well with any risk management authorities who are deemed to have a responsibility as a result of the flooding that has occurred. So the information is shared with them as well. But as a summary as to where we are, the link that's supplied into the report with the information that's on Power BI gives a summary of all of the Section 19s in the county. I would just hasten to add that sometimes we do get reports to us of Section 19, triggering a Section 19 investigation for internal flooding, but actually on investigation that hasn't always actually been the case. So that's when we class that as a near miss, but obviously that comes out of the full investigation. So just as a point of clarity.
Please do.
Thank you, and I appreciate that sometimes reports do contain personal information, but that in the modern day is often redacted, and I would have thought a full report would be of use on the publicly available. So I'd like to see if that could be looked into. Going back on the near miss, I mean, clearly there was a near miss, and I don't want to go into the details now, but there's actually no mention of it on that table at all as being investigated. So again, we don't seem to have all the information coming through, and I think that's something that we need to address as a council.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll look into that one and take it away. As regards to Section 19 investigations, that they are reported because that's something that we've agreed to do as part of our reporting under the Act and the duties that we have. The near miss is something that we have decided to do ourselves within the floods team, because then that actually better informs us of where we have issues and where potential mitigation works might take place. What you often find, though, is that in dealing with a near miss, you are dealing with a specific property, and we're, again, for that reason, the detail isn't published on the website because it's that's the decision that was taken to not publish it on the website because of that specific information identifying a property. So that's what we have at the moment.
Please do.
Yeah, I accept that, but I think we have to look at it, and it might be one property, but it could easily be adjacent properties. The one I'm thinking of is in a terrace, for instance, and it was sold, well, you say it's a near miss, I'll come back to you on that later, obviously, but the neighbours also are concerned about that, and they wouldn't be able to pick it up necessarily. So I do think we do need to look at the reporting. The other question I would have, and goes back to something which Councillor Fleetwood said right at the beginning, is with Section 19, what is a near miss, which part of the property counts, and that sort of thing. And I think that, again, is quite important, because you do get situations where people are spending time fighting the water to stop it coming into their main part of the property, but it's gone into the outhouses and so on. If they hadn't been there, their house would have been flooded, in which case the near miss wouldn't have been a near miss, because it would have actually happened. So I think circumstances like that need to be taken into account and need to be reported, so that it is well aware of why it's been declared a near miss and not an actual flood.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, absolutely. I take that point. And we didn't initially record near misses. We only initially recorded Section 19 investigations, and I think that's why the importance of the near miss certainly comes in now. So we have that record. What I would say is when we first started out on Section 19 investigations, and we had to report this as part of our duty, the decision was taken to only investigate where internal flooding to a property had occurred, so wet carpets, as it were, where it's come over the threshold. So that didn't include gardens, sheds or garages, for example. I know some lead local flood authorities actually took the decision to not trigger an investigation until perhaps 5 or more properties had actually been flooded, but we decided to take the decision to investigate every one where internal flooding had occurred. So clearly we're at the vagaries of the weather there, and you know, as was demonstrated in 2019 and 2020, the sheer volume of work that was generated in those severe weather events to investigate each and every internally flooded property numbered, you know, well over 200 investigations, which was a significant amount of work. So I only mention that just because if there was consideration given to expanding out more widely, we just need to give consideration to resource and the amount of time that would take. But you know, clearly these things are to be kept under review. You know, it's timely that we do look at these things. So more than happy to have any of these discussions. But I think, yeah, just bearing in mind some of the numbers that we've recently had to deal with, that really highlights the pressure that puts on resource. And just something that we perhaps need to factor in going forward if we have that wider discussion. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Matthew. The thing is, all the partners feed into the process, and that information of those near misses sometimes helps guide us where we should put our resource, because it might well be that we've had a report, but there's several near misses around. So I think it's all very valuable. And thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much indeed. Where we are with Section 19s, as we know along the journey, we've all been working very hard indeed to actually improve the performance and address the mechanism in actually dealing with these reports that are being given to us. And we've all been furnished along the way now with graphs and updates of where we've been with them. And indeed, there was a hiatus last year that we've gladly climbed down to from now. And I'm sure we should all take comfort from what has been achieved, not take our foot off the pedal as to continuing to see that we work to that end. And I think it's most important that we remember where we are and indeed actually herald the fact that where these improvements have been made. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've just got to bring Jonathan in next.
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to pick up on the near miss conversation. This is, I suppose, more for the benefit of the councillors, as Matthew will be aware of this. But at Anglian Water, we record both internal and external flooding incidents, where there's kind of escapes from the sewer, where whatever type of sewer that's coming from, so whether that's a foul, a surface water, or combined sewer. And when Matthew and I have spoken previously about how we can hopefully try and combine some of that data to look at where there might be opportunities to work together, not just on the internal floodings, but also on the near misses. And I think, Paul, that picks up on your point that you made at the end there about, you know, looking at using that near miss information and data to influence kind of decision making and future investment. So absolutely, that's something that we're keen to do as well, because we can look at and provide investment in for both internal and external flooding.
Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. Matthew, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm mindful mine wasn't linked to Section 19, so it was just two more updates linked to the report. So if anybody has any Section 19 investigations they wish to questions first, I'm more than happy to take those. If not, I was just going to provide an update on two other points regarding the report.
Any other questions? No, you've got the floor, Matthew.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I've had two questions raised with me in advance of meeting today. One of them was an update regarding works at Waddingham, and this is linked to some bank work and a drain that we're looking at and working in conjunction with the internal drainage board in that area. So I just wanted to give some reassurance that we are jointly looking at that together to bring some resolution to the issues that's being experienced at Waddingham, and more than happy to take wider discussions outside of this meeting if needed. But that is ongoing. And then secondly, just following on from questions raised at full council on Friday regarding Long Bennington. Long Bennington is a surface water scheme where we're looking to address issues in the village. And this is one where we have sought funding through the grant and aid process, being partly funded by Lincolnshire County Council, and hopefully also securing funding from Anglian Water in this project as well. This project has taken much longer to bring to fruition than we would have hoped. It has been more complex than some schemes. There's third-party landowners involved, which may have a bearing on how the most successful approach to dealing with the flood risk is taken forward. There's needed to identify particular outfalls and relevant capacities of systems that are a responsibility of the water companies, and in Long Bennington that's both Anglian Water and Severn Trent Water, because that's on the boundary of both water company areas. So there have been some challenges and complexities that has made this scheme take longer than would hope. However, I've had some proactive discussions and positive discussions over recent weeks, and I'd like to just give some assurances that we are doing all that we can to get this scheme delivered. It will bring significant benefit to a large number of properties in Long Bennington. And we are continuing to move that forward and liaising with the relevant parties, but just again give some reassurance that we're driving forward with a solution for Long Bennington. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Ian Fleetwood, please.
Yes, Matt will be very pleased to know that my comment isn't regarding his last statement, but I'm going to just pick up on what Jonathan's just said about near misses and near miss reporting. Perhaps in this scheme of partnership working, I don't know, could Anglian Water make County Council aware of their near misses? Could there be a PDF report sent from Anglian Water to County Council to cover for that, let's say over the last 3-4 years, since about, say, the beginning of 2019, to give us something as a headway to go forwards? And I don't know if that could also be shared with committee as well. But I think that would be a useful starting point for County Council to move forward from.
Thank you, Councillor Fleetwood.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that, Paul, if that's all right. So we already shared that data with Matthew and his colleagues. That data can be requested directly by the LCC team via self-service. So yes, I don't see a reason why we couldn't share it with the committee. So whenever we share data with the county, it's shared under a data sharing agreement, which the county is signed up to. So I presume that would mean all the councillors and everyone on the committee would be signed up to the same agreement. So it obviously just means that that data is not to be shared, because obviously it does contain sensitive data and most importantly, the locations of properties that are flooded. So so I may just have to check that, and if you might be able to check yourself at your end as well whether whether that would be the case, and you are kind of subject to that data sharing agreement, then that would be fine, and then I don't see a problem with that data being shared.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. No further points. Right then, we're asked to. I move that we receive and note the report and the further updates from the discussion. It's been a really good debate this morning on that. Does anybody dissent? No. Move on then to item 9, which is the local flood incident management. There's a draft memorandum of understanding between LCC and district councils, and this one's David, I think.
It is, thank you, Chairman. I'm joined by Graham Hemsel from Emergency Planning, and do we also have Darryl Redford as well, Chiara? Okay, not to worry. I'll carry on then. Members may well be aware that in Lincolnshire, the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum maintains a very well rehearsed, very clear plan for larger scale incidents when we cooperate as Category 1 responders to emergency situations, whether flooding or indeed other emergencies. And that enables us to move resources about, to act in concert, and to coordinate our efforts. These arrangements are reasonably regularly exercised, are well defined, and have a number of very clear trigger points, which means that the various elements, the various parts of those arrangements come into place at the appropriate moment. Over the last few years, we've had a number of incidents which have had significant local impact, but were not significantly widespread to trigger formally those multi-agency arrangements. So it became necessary to put something in place to bolster what we do when incidents happen that remain below those levels, but also that we put together something that actually describes, clarifies and defines what respective roles and responsibilities are, particularly between local authorities in the event of such incidents. In order to do that, we've put together the attached, I stress, draft memorandum of understanding at the moment. So this hasn't been formally agreed. This is still at the stage where it can be commented on, changed, and developed. Successive drafts of this have been shared with our colleagues in districts and other authorities. But it was time now, we felt, to bring it forward. Now it's in a nearly final form, to bring it to the attention of members and to seek members' support in drawing out final comments from our district colleagues and other colleagues, so that we can complete the documentation. There is a lot of process and technical detail in here, which I'm not necessarily expecting members will want to get into in fine detail here. So the recommendation is really a broader one to help encourage final comments from all the relevant authorities and support development and completion of that final agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, David. That was you felt like you were dropped into that one quite nicely. Good as usual. I obviously realise that there's quite a lot of people updating parish council-wise and district councils their emergency planning, and you do describe a process that doesn't normally work very, very well, but to pick up the items that aren't defined is quite a good thing to do. Do we have any questions, anybody? Councillor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just picking up on it, it's an interesting concept to actually have a mode of actually sharing the incidents, but there needs to be some clarity at the end of it, especially for the public, as to who is responsible and who's doing what. Because if we start to, I don't know if I should address this as a district or a county, with a district or county hat on, but if you have Mr. Public talking, or Mrs. Public, Mrs. Miggins from a pie shop, talking to you about why a pie shop is going underwater when there's a fire all around her, it's actually working out exactly who is responsible and who is going to deliver service. So there needs to be an absolute clarity for the public as to where things do start and stop with the various organisations. There is a little bit of a typo in there as well, in the actions required. Clarifications does have an A in it, but you know, my concern is down to who is responsible and getting that message out to the public so that they have an understanding.
Thank you very much for that. David, would you like to come back on that?
Take that on board entirely. That clarity is exactly why we're putting said document together.
It's always difficult to get that draft together first, isn't it? There's a lot of work goes in to get it to a final version, and people have really got to understand that. Yes, Councillor Fleetwood.
Yes, it comes to a slightly deeper level, though, in that you have the clarity and the clarification, but at the end of the day, there is responsibility and finance attached to something along the way, and it's actually going to a level a little bit deeper than the surface. So I think there's a bit more to it than just meets the eye.
The devil is indeed in the detail. Darryl, I believe you're there.
Hello, yes, sorry, the same old trouble trying to get off mute there. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? In that case... Oh, sorry. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that having talked with one or two fellow district councils at West Lindsey, they've been incredibly impressed with the work that I think A.D. Selby has been doing over there and bringing this in. And I hope that by looking at those projects together, we should be able to produce something which actually does help the local communities, because I think it's the smaller events which actually can cause the most anguish, because they're the ones which people often think are being ignored, rather than sort of fields and fields and fields and large areas which get the public response.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you. I think Councillor Fleetwood raises some very important points, given that, I mean, we, as part of the flood and drainage family in Lincolnshire, have a reasonable grasp of who is responsible for what and where the points of contact are and where to go. But that's obviously not something which is always evident to members of the public, particularly in times of emergency. But to that end, I'm really pleased to see that, and I think it would be very useful to have the first point of contact and partners list here, and the basic principles that go along with it. I think that's incredibly useful to have, at least to have a roadmap for where we go, or for where people choosing their first point of contact are directed to. I think it's a useful document to have in there, and I think absolutely essential given the complexities of it.
Thank you very much for that. Any further comments? No? Okay. I'll move then that we receive the report and note processes and procedures outlined in the draft Memorandum of Understanding. Being requested that our comments are recorded, I'll take it into consideration in making further amendments to the draft. Does anybody dissent from that? In that case, I'll take it that we're agreed. We'll move on now to the Environment Agency update. So, Morgan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from Matthew's update from the weekend, I just thought I'd give you a brief update as well. In addition to the heavy rainfall, we've also had quite high spring tides over the weekend. Thankfully, they've not caused too many issues. There are a number of flood alerts still out, both from the tides and from the rainfall from the weekend. There's obviously there's a flood alert on the River Trent that's probably likely to stay on for a little bit from experience. There's a lot of water coming down from the Peak District, but the remaining flood alerts that are in place are likely to come off throughout the rest of the day, not too much longer. Moving on to the report on mainly the capital schemes which we've got running at the moment. Saltfleet to Gibraltar Point, the beach management scheme, another successful sort of scheme last year, and planning's in full underway for the coming year. But in addition to that, I suppose it's a good reminder that it's not just about the beach management scheme, it's about completing works to the defences to make those more resilient. So we've completed works at Waynflete and works at Woollerbank are expected to be complete by the end of this financial year. Moving on to the Middle River Ancombe Catchment Management Scheme. This is partly in Lincolnshire and partly in North Lincolnshire, because obviously the Ancombe sort of flows from one to the other. This is looking at a more holistic and sustainable approach to water management throughout that catchment. And we're working in collaboration with Ancombe IDB and a newly formed Ancombe Catchment Partnership, which is led by the Links Wildlife Trust. We've completed in draft the strategic outline case, which is basically the business case, in order to be able to spend more money to do a sort of a larger business case on there. So we're hoping to complete the outline business case by the end of 2023 with a works programme leading up to 2027. So that will involve some modelling work as part of the sort of the outline business case there, which will take some time to put in place. Moving on to Waynflete, I know that this committee's been very interested to hear about progress in and around Waynflete. So just a reminder that we completed the action plan, which was based on 4 key themes. One was managing the raised defences, one was managing the flow through the system, one was managing floodwater storage, and the final one was creating a more resilient community. So in terms of managing the raised defences, we've put in a project into our capital programme for around about £3.2 million. This is to look at the resilience of the flood banks close to Waynflete. We've completed the strategic outline case for that. So we'll be moving on to complete the outline business case throughout the rest of this year. So again, a lot of modelling work will go into that, lots of economics, finance, that sort of thing, costing. It's fully funded at the moment at the £3.2 million. So that's been an element of grant and aid money from the government, and also money from what we call other government departments fund as well. So however, if we need more money than that, we will be looking for additional partnership funding from other sources. The managing flow element of the scheme is underway at the moment, actually, or part of it, and that's the phase 2 of the dredging works, which has been done in conjunction with Lindsey Marsh Drainage Board. So I'd like to record our thanks here to Lindsey Marsh for managing that scheme on our behalf. And it's a true sort of partnership scheme with East Lindsey, Lincolnshire County Council and the Town Council playing an important part in delivering that, and we'd like to record our thanks to all of those for that help. I don't want to put you on the spot, Andrew, but did you want to mention anything at this stage?
Chairman, thank you. Yes, I can just say that phase 2 is going well. There's been some additional silt levels identified by some of the local townspeople, and that's been now incorporated into the scheme. And it should be finished in the next few weeks. And then the final phase 3, that's being explored because it's going to take a different method to remove the silt, probably with some long reach excavators as opposed to the suction dredging technique that we've been using. So the project costs around about £1.5 million to remove the silt across the Steeping River and the bypass channel to try and ensure that a 1.5 metre depth of water is maintained. And the reason for that is, apart from enhancing the water quality that's around there, it also enables us to maintain a suppression on the weed growth naturally, to cut down the intervention of doing that. And then it improves things more locally too for things for the local townsfolk and folks that visit the area, you know, in terms of fishing and being able to visit there. And the final part of it, of course, in terms of flood protection, it helps us, helps the Environment Agency to evacuate water ahead of the type of weather we've had just now. So it's been a very successful joint project, as it's been identified.
Very welcome for the townspeople as well, and thank you for your update on that. I'd just like to give them the reassurance that the work is still happening. Having chaired the fairly lively meeting at Skegness following the event, I just wanted to make sure that we'd finally put a line under it.
Thank you. And moving on, also within the sort of the managing the flow theme, we've also completed a sort of refurbishment of the Borough Sluice at the outfall there, and also around sort of managing the sort of floodwater storage. We've successfully secured a resource from the RFCC for someone to work with sort of the landowners from April onwards. They'll be looking to work with landowners to look at natural flood management measures in the upper catchment, which help to slow the flow. Coming on to Boston, I suppose one of the key successes around Boston and the Boston barrier was that it was actually used. I can't remember at the last meeting whether we actually mentioned that or not, but yeah, the Boston barrier has been used for real in November, early November, on a forecast of a high surge tide. We're now working with the Port of Boston Authority to install floodgates to the wet dock entrance, and that will help to reduce the risk of flooding to a further 524 properties, in addition to the around about 14,000 which we've already claimed for as part of that scheme. I suppose related to that scheme, even though we've installed the barrier, it's with the recognition that we still need the other flood defences throughout Boston, and work will be commencing to look at those shortly upstream of the barrier. We're currently commencing some survey work at the moment, with that scheme being developed further this year. Downstream of Boston Haven, that work's largely complete now, and we obviously we need to concentrate on the upstream elements of that and completing the works associated with the barrier. The Lower Witham Flood Resilience Project looks at the Lower Witham between Lincoln and Boston. We've just we've commenced the survey work on that. That's going to be carrying on for another few weeks, and then after that we'll be commencing a lot of modelling work to understand what that survey is telling us, and this will take place over most of the coming year, sort of that hydraulic modelling, and after that we'll be able to put in place sort of plans and actions around, you know, how we can make those systems more resilient going forward. But a lot of work identified in our programme over the coming years in the Lower Witham catchment. Gibraltar Point to Freeston Shore project, we're looking at the works to sustain that wash bank between those 2 points. We've got £1.7 million in the programme over the coming year. We've completed the strategic outline case. We'll be moving on to the outline business case over the coming year, and that will eventually protect hopefully around about 2,000 households in that location. We're doing works at Sleaford. We just commenced the project there. We've got some ageing assets throughout Sleaford that keep the water levels high for amenity purposes, which then operate to allow flood water through in times of flood. Those are ageing assets, so we need to look at their replacement or refurbishment in the coming years. So we've got a project looking at that, and hopefully working with local partners to put in place something that's more sustainable going forward, and perhaps it will enhance the environment as well throughout Sleaford. Crowland and Calbit washes, we've got several assets there which will need refurbishment over the coming years. We currently need to understand a little bit more around how they operate, so we're improving the hydraulic model there. So eventually we want to spend around about £6.6 million in that location to protect nearly 663 households by March 2026. Finally, I just want to say that we've now completed quite substantial works in Lincoln itself. We've spent £6.5 million refurbishing and repairing assets throughout Lincoln. That will protect nearly 2,000 properties in Lincoln. And I think it's quite an achievement, really. You know, want to celebrate this achievement. The work's been carried out over several sites throughout the city. I think with minimal disruption to the local community. Some quite complex engineering work's been undertaken there. In addition to the works in the city, we've also spent £2 million updating the washland control panels, which are the washland areas upstream of Lincoln, which help to protect Lincoln during times of heavy river flows on the Witham and on the Till. So some significant work which has just been completed through Lincoln. So I'll be happy to take any questions on any of those schemes.
Thank you for that, Morgan. Councillor Clark, please.
Thanks, Chairman. There's work being carried out between Dixon Street and Altham Terrace, which I'm very grateful for, because it's probably why we haven't been flooded for the last 73 years. But the issue is that when you walk along the riverbank, the upper footpath that was laid as a result of the work being carried out, I've counted about 160 metres of cracks that have appeared in the path where it seems to be sliding downhill. Is there any plans to address that? The second question is Lincoln in more of a threat of being flooded than it was 10, 15 years ago? And, or in other words, how likely is it that Lincoln will get flooded?
So take your first point on the footpath. I'm not aware of the issue, so if you want to drop me a note afterwards, or I can talk to you afterwards, I can get you an update on that. On the wider question on whether Lincoln is more at risk now than 10 years ago, obviously, you know, we know a lot more about climate change. We know more about that sort of global warming, and I think Lincolnshire as a whole, you know, we can say that we're going to get you know, more rainfall over more intense periods. So we know that will be an increased risk. How that will play out in individual locations, it's difficult to know. But certainly, you know, this is why we're investing money as we are in things like the control panels at the washlands and the defences throughout Lincoln, is to keep those in good condition. However, you know, we talked about our national strategy, which is as well as, you know, obviously, you know, keeping our defences up together, is also thinking about what comes next. How do we make communities more resilient? Because we know that we can only build defences to a certain level. So we need to start the discussion, as we have done already, around, you know, the resilience measures behind flood defences. You know, because the defences are more likely to be overtopped more often going forward. So we need to have that discussion about how we make locations more resilient in the future, as well as continuing to maintain the existing defences.
Thank you for that, Morgan. Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you. I will be really interested, genuinely excited to see the Lower Witham Flood Resilience Project in there, and really looking forward to seeing the outcome of the survey work on the channel there. because I think just picking up on Councillor Clark's question, I think the Lower Witham is absolutely crucial when it comes not only to the defence of Lincoln, but also the outfall of Witham Third Drainage Board and Upper Witham, Witham First, which border that section of the River Witham. I also think it's very interesting. I mean, it was certainly interesting to see whether the outcome of this modelling and survey work confirms that the Lincolnshire River Board, when they used to have a depot at Southbury, because I believe, I imagine they felt it suitably important to have a local depot concentrating on regular maintenance and dredging and desilting along that section, that they were probably right to have had their depot there. And it would be interesting to see whether the outcome of this investigation effectively means that we have about 40 years worth of maintenance to catch up on. Particularly as I understand people who use that river frequently with boats would tell you that there's a fairly large lump of mud sitting in the river somewhere where the Kyme O enters into the Witham at Chapel Hill. So I'm really, really pleased this is getting the focus that I fear it is probably long needed. And hopefully the outcome of that. I mean, there are some river systems where obviously it's the right thing to do to slow that water down and to hold it back. But it feels very much to be the case that on that section of the Lower Witham, you want the water moving as fast through there and out the locks at Boston as you can possibly achieve. Equally, just picking up on the River Slee, are our ambitions here going to be in lockstep with the ambitions of those people working on restoring the navigation on the River Slee? Are these things that can be accomplished at the same time, appreciating the benefit perhaps of either holding some of that water back, controlling that water through lock systems, equally appreciating that having Sleaford as a potential destination for leisure traffic on the river has immeasurable advantages in terms of tourism, visitor economy and everything. I mean, it genuinely has, to my mind, putting a destination, a boating destination, a rivercraft destination accessible from the Witham would genuinely transform the River Witham as somewhere for boating, whereas at the moment it's a grassy bank on the left and a grassy bank on the right for about 35 miles. Having locks and a destination like Sleaford would be really, really good.
Yeah, just response to Councillor Ashton there on Sleaford initially. Certainly, yeah, we do hope to work very closely with I think it's the Navigation Trust or Society at Sleaford, and hopefully we will develop a scheme that's complementary to their, I suppose, aspirations going forward. And we'll take into account, you know, what their thoughts are on those aspects in future years. You know, there's at the moment looking into Sleaford, as I see, you know, a lot of the watercourse sort of flows through what was the old navigation at the moment, as well as there being the original form of the watercourse, which is less well used. So we're going to, you know, perhaps look at the balance of that a little more going forward. On the Lower Witham strategy, yeah, we're very much working closely with the drainage boards and location. They've been really helpful to us in planning the survey work going forward. And as part of the, I suppose, the inception of the project, which has sort of taken place over the last week or so, we've been sort of stressing the importance to complete that engagement sort of strategy, both with sort of IDBs and other partners, which will be really important to establish what we're going to do in that location. It's going to be really important to establish, you know, the maintenance needs of the Lower Witham, because that obviously, you know, needs to go sort of hand in glove with any future updates to the physical defences there, and looking at other measures that might be needed, such as offline storage of flood water as well. So it'd be, need to look at it holistically from maintenance through to flood water storage to even sort of natural flood management measures in some locations. So yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting time over the coming year, and we will be consulting lots of partners over that.
Thank you for that. There'll be, if you're going to make the SLE a navigation again, there's some interesting challenges with pipes and other bits that have been built over the years since. I know it fairly well, having paddled it a number of times. Councillor Fleetwood, please.
Yes, I welcome the level of work the Environment Agency are engaging in Lincolnshire, and it's to be applauded. Comments with regard to, is Lincoln more likely to flood now or is it more likely to flood now or in 10 years' time? Will it be more likely to flood? Well, I'll cast you back to 2 years ago when the riverbank broke on the Barlingzoe at Short Ferry, and I think Lincoln was getting fairly wet in the Brayford, and it was fairly full. Of course, when the bank broke at Short Ferry, suddenly the water levels started to disappear more than rapidly. And I think that the water levels went down to quite some degree at that level. So that really does put a lot of emphasis on the strength of the banks of the Lower Witham and how it's actually maintained. I welcome the support of the Lower Witham strategy coming forwards. I've got the copy of the report from 25 years ago, so it'll be interesting to compare the two and see what's been actually achieved between them. So that'll be another interesting affair. However, having looked at all this, I just wonder if the Environment Agency, and excuse me, I'm not trying to sound rude here, but if I was in an Environment Agency meeting, I'll be looking at some of the project funding costs attached to things, and I look at Saltfleet to Gibraltar Point, 52.7 million, and I look at the Lower Witham strategy, 164 million, and I just wonder if the Environment Agency have got the decimal point in the wrong place, and whether it should be shifted one side over. I know that if I go back to the first project, with the Saltfleet to Gibraltar Point, beach nourishment's typically about 7 million a year, but you've got one heck of a lot of work for 52 million, and it'd be interesting to see the detail of that. And 164 million pounds on the Witham. Well, the Witham's 30 odd miles long at a guess between Lincoln and Boston. Perhaps it sounds like a large figure, but is it big enough to make sure that those banks do keep the water within the boundaries? I don't know with regard to project, if indeed the engineers come back and say it's not enough, can the Environment Agency put more money into the project? Sorry, I don't want to shoot the messenger. I think it's probably something that Morgan might want to take back.
Thank you, Morgan.
No, thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. I will take some of that back, but the money that's represented there is the money in the long-term programme, where some of the initial works for the Lower Witham, which are funded within the 6-year programme, aren't anywhere near like the sort of the 160 million pounds that Councillor Fleetwood suggests there. And I think I will check it, but I think the money in there for the Saltfleet for Gibraltar Point represents the total expenditure through the current programme of beach renourishment and other works. So I will check up on it for Councillor Fleetwood and let him know a clarification on those numbers there.
Just to come back, I did pick up on the Saltfleet one, the first one on the agenda, because it said the start date and the end date was there, and it was a very short period of time to spend 52 million. So I'll leave it with you.
Thank you. And I would just say that the reason for doing the Lower Witham study is to clarify in more detail how much money we will need going forward. So we do need to put in an initial figure for programming purposes, but the reason for carrying out the outline business case is to clarify that expenditure that's needed going forward. The reason we do that surveying work is all to help build up a better picture of costs and some of the economics going forward.
Thank you very much for that, Morgan. Any further questions? No. Therefore, I move that we receive the update offered by the Environment Agency and note the progress of the works being undertaken in Lincolnshire, and obviously add to it all the notes that we've done amongst the discussion. Does anybody dissent? No. Thank you very much. In that case, I move on to item 11, which is the Anglian Water update. Do you want to do another further update, Jonathan?
I wouldn't mind just saying one thing just quickly, if that's all right, for Councillor Clark. So I've had an update on Northern Terrace. So we tried to go out last week, so the letters were correct, and we tried to undertake the work. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that just due to the conditions. The amount of water coming down the pipe was too significant. So the contractors, it's Danner and Walsh doing the work, they're going to go back within the next 3 weeks to complete that work. So that includes cutting out the roots and then relining the pipe where it needs relining. So yes, its timing is unfortunate. Obviously, we would have preferred to have gone in sooner, but hopefully they'll be in within the next 3 weeks or so. And I'll leave it there, Paul, if that's all right.
No, thank you very much for your input, Jonathan. Do you want to come back again, Councillor Clark?
No, I'm just very grateful for that, thank you.
I think we're very lucky to have an instant answer there. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Jonathan.
No, pleasure.
So, in line with the paper, I move that we note the verbal update from Anglian Water. And do we have any dissents from that? No. In that case, we move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee Works Programme. And would you like to present?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the committee is invited to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which would be included for consideration in the work programme. There have not been any changes or additions to the work programme that was circulated with your agenda items, and following today's meeting, items that were highlighted will be considered and added in future months. If there's anything in addition to what we've discussed today, I'm more than happy to take it under consideration. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, Councillor Fleetwood, please.
Yes, I'm just wondering with regard to if we have the working groups for flooding going on between officers in different locations, whether that should be brought back to a committee somewhere for ratification or scrutiny, or however you want to put it. I'm aware of the Langworth scenario. I'm sure there must be one or two other ones within the county. And it's probably something that I think that perhaps the committee should be aware of.
We're certainly keen to consider any works going ahead, but normally Matthew or David would bring those back to us.
Yes, Chairman. I mean, I think we're happy to have updates from any of the partner working groups. These are obviously, just for clarity, I suspect groups that are meeting, dealing with specific issues outside of the normal partnership framework, where we have the the local drainage groups, management group, and strategy group. I think, if I'm understanding Councillor Fleetwood right, this is looking at specific issues. For example, a group that's dealing with Langworth and so on and so forth. So, if there are any of those groups that we can identify and people would like updates from, I'm sure we could give consideration to that being provided at committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Happy with that, Councillor Fleetwood? Thank you. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify I asked last time, I think, for an update on the proposed reservoir to the east of Bourne. Is that what's meant by South Lincolnshire Waste Partnership Progress Update - Water Resources East? I'm not sure what is South Lincolnshire Waste Partnership Progress Update Water Resources East. If it's what I asked for, then that's great.
The project is called Water Resources East, and it's led by Anglian Water, and I dare say we will get an update.
But it's the same thing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
In that case, I move to note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 83 to 85. Does anybody dissent? In that case, I declare it's early lunch. Thank you very much. Thanks for your input, everybody.